Here.
Griffin,
Here.
Hairston,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Bashir Jones,
Here.
Joe Jones, Casey,
Present.
McCormack,
Present.
Mooney,
Here.
Polincic, Santana,
Present.
Slight,
Present.
Zone.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you. Will everybody please pause for a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
Of the
United
United States of America,
States and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all.
This council meeting is being held during the COVID-19 emergency declaration and is being conducted as a virtual meeting in accordance with Ohio's open meeting laws as amended by Sub-House Bill 197. Council Rule 49 require attendance of the mayor and his directors at of departments at council meetings is waived for this and any other virtual council meetings held under amended Sub-House Bill 197. In compliance with the charter and rules of council, a copy of all legislation to be heard during this council meeting was furnished previous to the meeting to every council member through their council email. It is hereby acknowledged without objection that all council members have received this legislation. Further, council members must be visibly present for all votes. If you're not present, your vote will not be counted. Madam Clerk, please dispense with the journal.
By Councilmember Santana, that the reading of the minutes of the last meeting be dispensed with the journal approved, seconded by Councilmember Conwell.
Communications.
File number 705-2020 from Council President Kelly, designating Fakita Stiggers as clerk pro tem for the purpose of signing documents on August 19, 2020. File number 706-2020, Megan Capel, project manager, the Community Builders, notice of intent to apply to Ohio Housing Finance Agency for multifamily funding for the development known as Wood Hill Station West, 9527 Buckeye Road. From the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, file number 707-2020, transfer of location application of a C2C2X to Swift Foods at 3935 West 130th Street, Ward 11.
First reading emergency ordinances to be referred for administrative and committee review.
Ordinance 673-2020 by council members McCormack, Brancatelli, and Kelly by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the amendments of ordinance 1379-09 to extend the term of tax increment financing structure for the Flats East Bank project for the additional 30 years pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code, to make related changes to the project agreement and to declare an emergency. Ordinance 674-2020 by council members Zone and Kelly by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety to apply for and accept a grant from U.S. Department of Homeland Security for the fiscal year 18 Port Security Grant Program, authorizing the acquisition of licenses and authorizing the purchase and installation of a maritime radar security system, including associated equipment, maintenance, and support for a period of 3 years. Ordinance 675-2020 by council members Zone and Kelly by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety to apply for and accept a grant from the United States Department of Justice COPS Office under the 2020 COPS Hiring Program for the Operation Relentless Pursuit Program. Ordinance 676-2020 by Councilmember McCormack, an emergency ordinance to repeal and replace Ordinance 798-11 by enacting an ordinance to provide for the evaluation of complete and Green Street elements in all construction and maintenance projects within the public right-of-way. Ordinance 677-2020 by council members McCormack, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly by departmental request. An emergency ordinance giving consent of the city of Cleveland to the county of Cuyahoga for the replacement of the Jefferson Avenue Bridge between West 3rd Street and the Cuyahoga River authorizing Director of Capital Projects to enter into agreements and to apply for and accept an allocation of county motor vehicle license tax funds. Ordinance 678, 2020, by council members McCormack, Johnson, and Brancatelli, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Capital Projects to issue a permit to Electric Gardens LLC to encroach into the public right-of-way of West Fourth by installing, using, and maintaining streetscape and landscape improvements. Ordinance 679, 2020, by council members Casey and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Public Utilities to exercise the first option to renew the joint registration agreement with the Medical Center Company as authorized by Ordinance 1467-18. Ordinance 692, 2020, by council members Zone and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Public Safety to enter into one or more contracts with Avail Forensics for the acquisition of software and licenses for the Pathfinder turnkey solution for the Division of Police, and authorizing Director to enter into an agreement with the Federal Bureau of Investigation to reimburse the city for expenses related to the city's acquisition of the software and licenses. Ordinance 693, 2020, by Councilmember Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Finance to enter into an agreement with the Cleveland Foundation to establish, manage, and implement the Greater Cleveland COVID-19 Response Fund Program by providing grants to local nonprofits to assist them with COVID-19 related issues. Ordinance 694, 2020, by council members McCormack, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance to vacate a portion of West 37th Place and West 36th Street. Ordinance 695, 2020, by council members Mooney, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance to vacate a portion of the first unnamed alley west of Bel Air Road and north of Guardian Boulevard. Ordinance 696, 2020, by council members Santana, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance to vacate a portion of King Court Southwest and West 31st Street. Ordinance 699, 2020, by council members Cleveland, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance to vacate a portion of Butner Court. Ordinance 700, 2020, by council members Zone and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety to employ one or more professional consultants, computer software developers, or vendors to acquire licenses for or to develop and implement one or more policy management systems and other related services for the various divisions of the Department of Public Safety. Ordinance 701, 2020, by council members McCormack, Johnson, and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Public Works to renew a lease agreement with the Cleveland Browns Stadium for the lease of a limited access parking lot located on the south side of First Energy Stadium for a term of 1 year with 4 one-year options to renew, exercisable by the Director of Public Works. Ordinance 702, 2020, by council members Casey and McCormack. An emergency ordinance to repeal Chapter 163, Tree Commission Sections 163.01 to 03 of the codified ordinances as enacted by Ordinance 2044-92, passed December 7, 1992, and to supplement the codified ordinances by enacting new Chapter 163, Tree Commission Sections 163.01 to 04 to reestablish the Tree Commission.
First reading emergency ordinances to be passed.
Ordinance 686, 2020, by Councilmember Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance to amend Section 50 of Ordinance 323-15 as amended relating to compensation for various classifications. Ordinance 687, 2020, by Councilmembers McCormack, Cleveland, Brancatelli, and Zone. An emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Public Works to enter into agreement with Cleveland Public Theater for the Student Theater Enrichment Program through the use of wards 3, 5, 12, and 15 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 688, 2020 by Councilmember Polensek, and an emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Department of Public Works to enter into an agreement with Greater Collinwood Development Corporation for the Collinwood Observer Project through the use of Ward 8 casino revenue funds. Ordinance 689, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request, an emergency ordinance approving the collective bargaining agreement with Cleveland Association of Rescue Employees, Local 1975, and to amend Section 22 of Ordinance 32315 as amended relating to compensation for various classifications. Ordinance 690, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request, an emergency ordinance approving the collective bargaining agreement with International Local 100 AFSCME Ohio Council 8 AFL-CIO, and to amend Section 8 of Ordinance 32315 as amended relating to compensation for various classifications.
Read the motion to suspend the rules.
By Councilmember Santana, that the rules be suspended and the legislation just read be placed on final passage, seconded by Councilmember Conwell.
Please call the roll on passage.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Polensek, Santana, Slight, Zone. 15 yeas.
Thank you. First reading ordinances referred for administrative and committee review.
You need to call the roll on passage, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I did. Please call the roll on passage.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Polensek, Santana, Slight, Zone. 16 yeas.
Thank you. First reading ordinances referred for administrative and committee review.
Ordinance 703, 2020 by Councilmember McCormack, an ordinance changing the use, area, and height districts of a parcel of land east of Scranton Road and south of Kenilworth Avenue and adding an urban form overlay district. Ordinance 704, 2020 by Councilmember McCormack, an ordinance changing the use, area, and height districts of a parcel of land on the northwest side of Literary Road at the intersection of West 10th Street, known as permanent parcel 004-12-091, and adding an urban form overlay along the Literary Road frontage.
First reading resolutions referred for administrative and committee review.
Resolution 691, 2020 by Council Members Bashir Jones, Johnson, and Brancatelli by departmental request, an emergency resolution declaring the intent to vacate a portion of East 66th Place extending from Lexington Avenue to Quimby Avenue.
First reading emergency resolutions to be adopted.
Resolution 680, 2020 by all members of council, an emergency resolution commemorating the 100th anniversary of the passage and ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, providing for women's suffrage. Resolution 681, 2020 by all members of council, an emergency resolution strongly opposing the federal government's attempt to rush the 2020 census count, demanding that the federal government return to the revised extended schedule to ensure an accurate account, and urging the Jackson administration to sign on to the California lawsuit challenging the decision to shorten the time frame for completing the census. Resolution 682, 2020 by all members of council, an emergency resolution opposing Senate Bill 352 to modify municipal income tax employee withholding rules for COVID-19 related work from home employees. Resolution 683, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly, an emergency resolution fixing the date of the next regular meeting of council. Resolution 684, 2020 by Councilmember Kelly, an emergency resolution designating Jennifer Heinert O'Leary and Rachel Nigro Scalish individually as designees of members of Cleveland City Council for the purposes of attending public records law training programs required under the Ohio Revised Code. Resolution 685, 2020, by all members of council, an emergency resolution urging Secretary LaRose to immediately reverse his premature and unwarranted order banning off-site secure drop boxes for absentee ballots, and urging the City of Cleveland Law Department to explore whether a legal action to vindicate voting rights could be brought pursuant to the Federal Voting Rights Act, the Help America Vote Act, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and the Ohio Constitution and relevant statutes guaranteeing all citizens their precious right to vote. Resolution 697, 2020, by council members Kelly, Zone, Johnson, and Griffin, an emergency resolution objecting to the order of Ohio Power Sitting Board in the icebreaker case, OPSB case 168771 EIBGN, to prohibit icebreakers turbines from rotating and producing electricity all night for 8 months out of the year, and strongly urging the Ohio Power Sitting Board to grant icebreakers appeal in the case.
Madam Clerk, before we call the roll, I believe all council members wanted to be added to that resolution on the power side.
697, 2020,
Yes, please.
so noted.
Thank you. Read the motion to suspend the rules.
By Councilmember Santana, that the rules be suspended and the legislation just read be placed on final passage. Seconded by Councilmember Conwell.
Please call the roll.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Polensek, Santana, Slight, Zone. 16 yeas.
Please call the roll on adoption.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Polensek, Santana, Slight, Zone. 16 yeas, Mr. President.
Thank you. Second reading, emergency ordinances to be passed.
Ordinance 498, 2020, by Councilmember Kelly, an emergency ordinance confirming the authority of the Cleveland Botanical Garden to charge admission fees and parking fees and to erect improvements on property leased or subleased to the Cleveland Botanical Garden, and authorizing Director of Public Works to enter into a fourth supplemental indenture of the lease agreement. Ordinance 499, 2020, by Council Members Cleveland, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance to amend the title in Section 18 of Ordinance 588-17 relating to giving consent to the Director of Transportation of the State of Ohio to remove and replace the existing East 75th Street Bridge, to supplement the ordinance by adding new sections 7A, B, C, D, and 17A to add the authority to apply and accept additional funding, and to cause payment to the state of the city, and to cause payment to the state for the city's share of the improvement. Ordinance 500, 2020, by Council Members Griffin, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the mayor to apply to the District 1 Public Works Integrating Committee for state funding for the rehabilitation of a portion of Buckeye Road, and to accept such funding, to apply for and accept gifts and grants from various entities for the improvement, authorizing Director of Capital Projects to enter into contracts and to agreements to design and construct the improvement and other agreements, and authorizing the Commissioner of Purchases and Supplies to acquire, accept, and record for right-of-way purposes real property and easements necessary to make the improvement. Ordinance 501, 2020, by Council Members Bishop, Cleveland, Griffin, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly, by departmental request. An emergency ordinance giving consent of the City of Cleveland to the Director of Transportation of the State of Ohio for improving Union Avenue from Broadway to Kinsman, to apply for and accept any gifts or grants from any public or private entity, authorizing Director of Capital Projects to enter into any relative agreements, and causing payment of the city's share to the state for the cost of the improvement. Ordinance 502-2020 by Council Members McCormack, Johnson, Brancatelli, and Kelly by departmental request. An emergency ordinance giving consent of the City of Cleveland to the Director of Transportation of the State of Ohio for resurfacing a portion of West 14th Street, to apply for and accept any gifts or grants from any public or private entity, authorizing Director of Capital Projects to enter into any relative agreements, and causing payment of the city's share to the state for the cost of the improvement. Ordinance 647-2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing Director of Finance on behalf of Cleveland Municipal Court to apply for and accept a grant from the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board of Cuyahoga County for the 2020-2021 Specialized Dockets Program, and authorizing Director to enter into one or more contracts with various agencies, entities, or individuals to implement the grant. Ordinance 655-2020 by Council Members Brancatelli and Kelly by departmental request, authorizing Director of Economic Development to enter into a grant agreement with the Greater Cleveland Media Development Corporation, DBA Greater Cleveland Film Commission, or its designee, to assist with the general operating expenses of the organization. Ordinance 658-2020 by Councilmember Kelly by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing payment of membership dues of the City of Cleveland in Northeast Ohio Area Coordinating Agency for fiscal year 2021.
Read the motion to suspend the rules.
By Councilmember Santana, that the rules be suspended and the legislation just read be placed on final passage, seconded by Councilmember Conwell.
Please call the roll.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Polensek, Santana, Slife, Zone. 16 yeas.
Chair.
Please call the roll on passage.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Polensek, Santana, Slife, Zone. 16 yeas.
Thank you. Second reading emergency resolutions to be adopted.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to put a no down for me on a vote for the Cleveland Film Commission.
Oh, thank you. And I believe Councilman Conwell? Councilman,
I'm here, yes.
did you want to vote no on Cleveland Film Commission?
You want to do what now?
I'm asking you if you wanted to vote no on Cleveland Film Commission.
Yes, no.
Thank you.
You put me no. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
Okay, so the vote is 14 yeas, 2 nays.
Okay, is that on the roll or adoption?
That's on adoption.
That will
Mr.
then.
Chairman,
Councilman?
I'm sorry, I couldn't find the hand raise option wouldn't work. You can log me as a no vote too. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's 13 yeas, 3 nays.
Thank you. So this will conclude the legislative session.
No, we still have to do the second reading resolutions.
Oh, I'm sorry. So those were the emergency ordinances. So we have to do second, I'm sorry. Second reading emergency resolutions to be adopted.
Resolution 503-2020 by Council Members McCormack, Johnson, and Brancatelli by departmental request, an emergency resolution declaring the intent to vacate a portion of Japan Court Southwest. Resolution 504-2020 by council members McCormack, Johnson, and Brancatelli by departmental request, an emergency resolution declaring the intent to vacate a portion of Lorraine Court. Resolution 625, 2020 by all members of council, an emergency resolution urging the Cleveland Metropolitan School District to change the name of Louis Agassiz Elementary School to Louis Stokes Elementary School.
Read the motion to suspend the rules.
By Councilmember Santana, that the rules be suspended and the legislation just read be placed on final passage, seconded by Councilmember Conwell.
Please call the roll.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Polensek, Santana, Slight, Zone. 16 yeas.
Please call the roll on adoption.
Kelly, Bishop, Brancatelli, Cleveland, Conwell, Griffin, Hairston, Johnson, Bashir Jones, Joe Jones, Casey, McCormack, Mooney, Polensek, Santana, Slight, Zone. 16 yeas.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please excuse the absences?
By Councilmember Santana, that the absence of Councilmember Joe Jones is hereby excused, seconded by Councilmember Conwell.
Thank you. This council is adjourned at the call of the chair. The next regular meeting of council will be held on Wednesday, September 9th, 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I had a miscellaneous question.
Councilman?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Council Polensek?
Yeah, I had a miscellaneous question or comment. Mr. Chairman, I am, unlike many of my colleagues, we all feel the same with the growing crime problem in our city. And I'm officially requesting that at some point we get an update from the command staff of CPD as it pertains to what their game plan is to deal with this growing crime problem. Over the weekend, this last weekend, we saw additional carnage, indiscriminate shootings, and just a chaos across our city. And I'm becoming, like most residents, increasingly alarmed by this violence, unprecedented violence that we're seeing. And as of last count, I believe the number was 30 more homicides so far this year than last year. We understand there's Operation Legend, that is a joint partnership between the city of Cleveland and the U.S. Attorney's Office, federal government. We need to understand how that's going to impact our neighborhoods and exactly as it pertains to people working in our districts. I'm hearing it every day from residents who are concerned about the growing violence and the propensity for violence in the community. When innocent men, women, and children have to live in fear because individuals want to stand out in the street and shoot like they're in a video game, we as a legislative body, we've got to ask some serious questions of the administration, because I'm not hearing a clear message coming out of the command staff as to what their game plan is. We know we need more officers working the streets. That's a given. We need community policing. We need more engagement with our citizens. But at the end of the day, there is no substitute for officers working our streets and responding to calls for service. So I need to understand what the game plan is, because I don't know what the game plan is. And I don't believe I'm the only one who feels like this. So again, I'm going to request from you at some point. I've communicated to Chairman Zone of Public Safety, and I know he feels passionately about this as well. They need to come, they need to explain to us what they're doing, what their game plan is toward the end of this year as it pertains to the number of officers that are leaving the department, who are retiring, and what their game plan is proposed going into next year. We need more people working our streets. We need community policing. We need to have our citizens engaged. And this violence that we're seeing is outrageous. And I'm sickened by it. I'm disgusted by it, and I want to do something about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So Councilman Zone, we'll work together to get something on the books on that. Councilman Kevin Conwell.
Thank you. I want to back up. I think I talked with you about this yesterday. I visited the county prosecutor and we hit our 100th homicide. And in August, we're up 40% in homicides, Mr. President. We're up 40%. That's sad. And what happened over the weekend in Collinwood on East 149th Street in broad daylight, with children were out there playing, people were out shooting, and the guy was assassinated in Mike Polensek's ward. We got to come up with a game plan. I'm not opposed to us bringing back in the state troopers. You know, when they pull people over, they take guns out of their cars. We need help, Mr. President. Majority of my phone calls is about gunshots that they hear and crime that's in the community. People are going to end up leaving the city of Cleveland. You can't bring in businesses. You can't, there's no safe routes to and from school or whatever, although they're not going to school. You can't go shopping, the whole 9 yards. We're up 40%. 40%. And let me say this, and then I'll yield. Out of the 92% out of the 100 is, guess what? African-American males, right, murdering one another.
Yeah.
Got a serious crisis going on here.
Yeah, and Councilman Conwell and I have had many conversations about this, and I hear you loud and clear. It's happening everywhere, and I think that the most important thing is we can't rest on the idea that this is COVID or this is national, because that doesn't matter to people that are victims of this violence. So we can't just kick this issue and just accept that it's something that's going on in other cities. That doesn't matter to our residents. So I appreciate you.
Okay. I got this right here. So we got to do is break it down. Let's
Wait,
try
hang
to,
on.
you know,
Well, one sec. Could you turn your mic off for a sec, Councilman? Councilman Conwell, are you concluded?
You know what? Let me say this, and then I yield to him. I put in every council member box the report that county prosecutor gave to me, and if you read his report, you will be alarmed. It's broken down to every ward, and the homicides is happening in every ward, and we're 40% ahead of last year. With that, looking at the trends, Mr. President, we can easily hit 160 homicides by the end of the year. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for giving us that report and your attention to this, Councilman. But I will, as soon as we're done, I'm going to go to my box and get mine out. So thank you. Councilman Joe Jones. And then I'll go to Councilman Bashir Jones and Councilman Zone.
yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. President? All right, so I just need you to move the video piece off if you can, and that way you can see my face. All right.
Wait, say it again.
All right.
Wait.
Okay, you got me now. Okay, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have been, and I hear what you're saying, Mr. President, and I hear my colleagues. We got to find out. I mean, how many police officers do we have currently right now that is in effect? Do we have that 1,600 total allotment of police officers?
Yeah, without, I don't know the exact numbers, but we're gonna have to get that number.
Okay, so Mr. President, I just urge that we need to know where our assets are. And I agree with my colleague, Kevin Conwell, about bringing in more assistance. Since we have all these alliances that Mr. Williams and our city has with other police departments, I concur with him. We are actually fundamentally in a state of emergency. It's so bad, Mr. President, that my commander cannot put a car on the street, which has been a violent situation that happened where 2 people were gunned down and assassinated over here on Walton Avenue. That's just how bad it is when you can't put one patrol car in place for any length of any considerable amount of time. So that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, which means that if we have anybody that is sitting at these desks and they're police officers and they're capable, we need to put our supervisors. I think the contract triggers for a state of emergency scenario where supervisors, all 375 of them, should be in cars and they should be on the streets keeping our citizens safe. I've had several homes in my neighborhood totally shot up, senior citizens living afraid. This is a situation that is that we need to do something about. And Mr. President, we need to have Mr. Williams to come to the council and tell us some kind of plan to keeping our citizens safe. The only other step is to start marching on the city for services that we're paying for and we're not getting them. and we shouldn't be paying taxes for services that we're not getting. And there needs to be some level of accountability for safety. And right now, we're on fire over here in Ward 1. We're on fire in the 4th District. And unfortunately, we don't have enough resources in terms of manpower in the 4th District. And this is not to knock any of our other colleagues, but it's my understanding some of our districts got 20 additional police officers in those districts, and they don't have nowhere near the kind of crime rate that's happening in the 4th District. In fact, we have a super gang war going on in the 4th District, and people are actually being murdered and killed.
Okay, so Councilman, if I
so-
can interrupt for a second, because I think this is gonna, I believe this will address a lot. We don't know a lot of the specifics, but Councilman Zone is going to be hosting a committee hearing on this topic September 3rd at 10 a.m. And that's probably the appropriate venue for these questions in terms of the police deployment and all this, because none of us really know. I mean,
Right.
maybe.
Well, I hope that Councilman Zone don't be trying to edit all the members when they're trying
All
to
right.
speak, and he just let it be a free form meeting.
Yeah.
Just because here's the issue. I know he wants to edit and all that, but
We're not
I ain't
gonna-
got time for that nonsense. And I need for him to be able to protect my neighborhood, keep me safe, or he move himself off the committee so that we can.
Listen, we're not going to attack each other in this forum. The committee meetings are going to go on. I want to see Councilman Bashir Jones wanted to get a point in. I want to go to Councilman Bashir Jones right now.
Well, if you don't mind, Mr. President, before I wind it up, I just want to make sure that the meeting
Did you
is
hear what I
one
said?
of such. Yes, I got you. And I want to just say, I hope that the meeting is one of such where we have a free flowing opportunity to engage the administration and to get safety concerns dealt with in our neighborhoods. And there's no disrespect to Zone. I just don't like to be edited, when I'm sitting at the table trying to get help for my citizens who are being handed situations that's causing for them to have to want to move from the neighborhood. So when we talk about, I just want to just make sure when we're talking about our citizens, he has his ward, and I know he gets a lot done in his neighborhood, but I need to get a lot done in my neighborhood too.
Yeah,
And so
understood.
I just need your consideration at this table, at this hearing, so that it's a fair hearing and that we can ask the questions and we can get those questions answered by the administration, because I'm in trouble over here as relates to the gunfire, the shooting every night.
So thank you so
And
much.
I close it with this by saying thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate all of my colleagues, and as well as the chairman of the safety committee letting us have an open free time so that we can, in terms of how we do it with other committees, to say what we got to say. And a good committee chairperson is Mr.
Okay, listen, Councilman, your time's up. I want to encourage people to review the council rules. We do not use this forum to attack people's motives, to attack personalities. This is not what that is for. This is not a forum to deal with personal grievances amongst council members. So this is for policy-related, city-related matters. Councilman Jones wanted to get a point in. I want to go to Councilman Matt Zone. Councilman Bashir Jones, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I just took a look at the email that was sent out in regards to the board of the Cleveland Film Commission, and as I was worried about, as we look at the board is overwhelmingly there are very few. I think there's one African American on the board. There's no Hispanics on the board, and it's majority what we kind of know. And then what it made me think was, how complicit have we been as a city against equity? We say that's what we want, but how complicit have we been? So, Mr. President, what I would like to request is for every group that we give money to, every group, every company, every organization, I would like to get the board. I would like to see the board, the equity of the board, the diversity of the board. We understand that there's no diversity, there's no innovation. So what I would like to see is for every group that we give money to, every nonprofit, every business that we're doing businesses, whatever, I would like to see, just like how we were able to get the snapshot of we just passed legislation on declaring racism a public health crisis. And I would argue that we have been complicit. I would urge all of my colleagues to take a look at the board of the Cleveland Film Commission. I would urge us also. I was talking with Councilman Zone, who I really appreciate, because we were discussing the fact that the fire department now has a class of 40 new people, and they're all white men. So we're talking about it, but what are we really doing? And it just seemed like it just continues to be the conversation. So I appreciate Councilman Zone for calling for a hearing, and we really take a look at, let's bring the vanguards to the table. Let's bring Black Shield to the table and let them and allow them to discuss what are the issues that they've been facing. As we know, the fire department is facing an issue from the federal government because of lack of diversity. So we're continuing to talk about it, but what are we doing differently about it? And we're continuing to give organizations money. We're continuing to give organizations contracts who have not shown us that they are on board with providing equity. And I don't want to just leave this election cycle and in my first 4 years and we don't really address this problem. The legislation is great, but let's start looking at ourselves. And once again, Mr. President, what I'm requesting is some information on the organizations that receive money from the city. What is the makeup of their boards? I would like to be able to get that information. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Matt Zone.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. Was that can somebody get that information to me? Is there somebody that will be able to get that for me?
Yes. We need to, if we can talk after the number of organizations that we contract with as vendors, it's going to be voluminous. I think we need to find out how we best go about that. But all those going forward where it is readily available, I'm going to make sure that happens so that you have all that in your hands. But that's going to be a big project that we're going to have to spend some time going over in terms of all of the different contractors, vendors, and the people that do business with the city of Cleveland. But you're absolutely right. That's stuff. That's information we need to know. Councilman Zone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So just wanted to respond to a couple of things that I heard. First of all, we are going to have a safety committee a week from tomorrow, next Thursday, September 3rd at 10 a.m. I have 2 liquor hearings next Wednesday in Columbus, video conference, or I would do it normally on a Wednesday, which is our committee date. So I apologize to the members, and I'd welcome all individuals to participate. We will be having 2 topics we will be discussing. There's several pieces of legislation that we're going to hear, but then I'm going to invite the Secretary of the Civil Service Commission, Secretary Sprang, as well as the individuals who run our recruiting program to talk about recruitment. I'm also going to invite Director Howard and Chief Williams to talk about the recent uptick in violence. Just so my colleagues are aware, homicides are up 60% in New York City. They're up 70% in Chicago. This is not an anomaly that's just happening in the city of Cleveland. I don't know what's going on. I suspect a lot of it is related to the pandemic and stress that people are incurring. But in any event, we need safe streets and we need a safe city. So I look forward to the conversation with the Chief of Police to hear about that. We will also get into what we're doing around recruitment and building diversity within our ranks and file of public safety. But to my colleagues, I do feel as one of the elders of this council to remind the council that at the beginning of a term, and since I was impugned by a member of this body, we swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of Ohio and the Constitution and Charter of the city of Cleveland. We voted for under Rule 23, which says members may address the council respectfully, asking the presiding officer to be recognized. Rule 23 mandates that comments shall avoid personalities and refrain from impugning the the motives of any other member's argument or vote. This rule is consistent with Rule 43 of Robert's Rules of Order. I'd encourage Councilman Joe Jones to read Robert's rules, actually to read our rules of council, which also instructs members to avoid personalities and similarly states that it is not allowable to arraign the motives of a member.
Councilman, I hear you. I'm just going to ask you to do the same and not refer to any council member by name.
Yes, I will honor that. Our council rules, as you know, Mr. Chairman, as do Robert's Rules of Orders, intend that members of a body act with dignity and restraint, especially while discussing businesses of the body in a public forum. If a member fails to act appropriately, the presiding officer must call that member to order, which I have done and will continue to do in a public safety committee hearing if members act without the appropriate level of decorum in order to prevent the continued impropriety and ensure that etiquette is followed and maintained that doesn't disrespect our body. I'd encourage my colleagues, watch Congress. They get 5 minutes. I give 15 minutes for each member of council to ask questions of the administration. Members,
You don't give 15 minutes.
You're violating.
You don't give 15,
Mr. President, under Council Rule 9, you must preserve order and decorum.
and you don't follow the Robert rules.
Members
Could do it, we wouldn't be having this
now
problem.
violating Council Rule 9.
So I'm not gonna,
All. Madam Clerk, will you please mute all?
Yes.
If you'll please mute all. This conversation.
you're getting
offline.
checked.
Please.
You're getting checked because you're inappropriate
please mute
and you're not
Councilman-
following Robert rules of order. You're not following them. If
Thank you. This council meeting is adjourned. Our next, well, it's already been adjourned, but our next meeting is on September 9th, 2020. Thank you all very much. Have a great day. And Anthony, I'll give you a call.